Like billows you are tempest tossed. When you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. Awesome. There's when I'm riding to work, I listen to like the K-Love station that has like the Christian music on there and stuff. And there's actually a newer song that's come out recently. And it reminded me of that when we were reading the kind of blessings. And it's talking about that, about the blessings we have in our lives that God bestows upon us. And the name of the song is Can't Count Them. Because it just talks in there about when we really sit down to think and to look at our lives and the totality of our existence in this earth, and to think every moment of every day the blessings that God has bestowed upon us, and those that they are just too many blessings to truly count. We can think of probably a lot of really big ones and pretty amazing ones, and even some of the small ones, but we just miss out probably even on some of the ones we don't even think about that we're blessed by. So that was a really good reminder in that song. So we are going to continue our look today at Jesus Christ, our Passover. And we are building from where Tracy left off last week after the initial prayer prior to getting to the Garden of Gethsemane, and the moving to the garden and all the teaching that went on and took place between Jesus Christ and his disciples as they're moving to the Garden of Gethsemane, and really coming to the imminent point of where he is going to be handed over to the enemy. We've read now for the last over 2 years now, as we were looking at our study of the life and ministry of Jesus Christ, all the many times that the Pharisees and the scribes and all the different individuals that were coming for Jesus, that were trying to catch him, trying to trick him, trying to find some way to find fault in what he was doing and to find lies in what he was saying and whatever they could to kind of get him out of there, because he was a challenge to their power structure and what they wanted at that time and how things should be done and how people should behave and how people should believe. And he was challenging that with the truth. And because he was challenging with the truth, they never could do anything right to get him. Even when they tried to falsify things, that it didn't work. But we are going to see today that he is going to be delivered into the hands of the enemy. But it's going to be a really important part when we get to that moment when it occurs of why he was finally taken into the hands of the enemy and what led to that and the reasoning behind what happened there. So we are going to pick up. We are going to be kind of bouncing throughout the Gospels again today. Lots of scripture built up and putting them all together to see the totality of the occurrences here within this section. So we are going to begin in Matthew chapter 26, if you want to start there. And we'll be verses 31 through 34. If you're okay, I'm going to get this down. It was like at 77. So I'm going to just put out just a little bit. Get that, you get all that singing going and all that really good, prayer and stuff going. It gets the blood flowing. You get a little bit hotter over here, I think. So. All right, so we're going to start in Matthew 26, and again, verses 31 through 34. Finn, if you'll read those three for me, please.
Then said Jesus unto them, and ye shall be offended, all ye shall be offended because of me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered abroad. But after I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. Peter answered and said unto him, Though all men shall be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that this night before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice.
So we open up here, and a couple of things we'll point out here as we look in verse 31 to begin. It says, Then Jesus said unto them, All ye shall be offended because of me. Now, we have to understand the use of that word offended. It doesn't mean that Jesus Christ is offending them. Like I'm going to say things that are going to offend you, right? That's not what he's saying there. So the word here that is interpreted to be offended is actually a Greek word that means made to stumble. That the disciples were going to be made to stumble. I think it had been brought up before because of him. They're going to have some things they're going to have to face coming up here in this next little bit of time as we're moving into this moment when Christ is going to be handed over to the enemy. And it said that you shall be made to stumble because of me, because of what happens to him. Right, then the disciples will stumble. Now, Christ has talked about this idea of to stumble many times, during his time of ministry, and a lot of times he referred to it as those who were causing, young, Christians to stumble, when people would get in the way and cause people that were new to the word, right, new to the knowledge of the truth, and when they would get in the way, they would cause them to stumble. And he's referring here now, though, that the disciples will be caused to stumble because of what's about to happen to him. He's about to be taken from them. He's been preparing their hearts for this now for a while, right, and trying to talk to them, and they've had a real hard time accepting and understanding what he's been saying. They just think, the band's staying together forever and it's all good to go, and even when he talks about it's not going to happen, they still struggle with it, and then they'll kind of parcel it out a little bit, but then they come back around to it's going to be good. But we're in this imminent moment of when it's going to happen, and so he's bringing it back up again, that this night, or this is the time when this is going to take place, and you will be caused to stumble because of me. And he says, for it is written. Now, this is one thing we know. The Pharisees and the scribes and all the individuals that were always going after Jesus Christ, one thing they always struggled with when he would confront them was understanding and knowing the scriptures. And which was an interesting thing because they were supposed to be the authority on the scriptures. And Jesus Christ challenged them many times by utilizing the truth of the scriptures. And he does it once again here. He's always, thinking. He's always in conversation with his Father, so he always knows what to say in these moments. And so he refers to scripture that's found in Zechariah. It's Zechariah chapter 13 and verse 7. And I have it pulled up, so I'll read it to you. But this is coming from, Zechariah was an Old Testament prophet. He's kind of, if you look in the way, the Old Testament is laid out, he's right there towards the very end, right? Kind of the later prophets prior to when we have this kind of period of time when we don't have much that's talked about. We know that people still believed, from that ending point to when we see, the reemergence there of preparation for the birth of Christ. And Zechariah was one of these later prophets that was sharing this. And he says in chapter 13, verse 7, Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn my hand upon the little ones. We've talked a lot also about this analogy of the shepherd. Jesus Christ uses the analogy of the shepherd many times during his ministry, a few different times when he started seeing the great multitudes of people that were coming to hear the word, to be coming to learn the word that was being shared. And he looks out and he had mentioned a few different times there were so many sheep that were in need of shepherds. And he was preparing the hearts of his disciples and his apostles to become the shepherds of those sheep. And then here we see he makes a reference to that analogy again, because the great shepherd that he is to them is going to be taken away. And as it was prophesied when Zechariah has it there in verse 7 of chapter 13, if you smite the shepherd, the sheep will be scattered. Now, it's probably not surprising which of the apostles decides to step up and to make a bold statement, because Peter tends to do this a lot. And we're going to see he does even some more things later on in the record. But he does step to the plate, right? And he answers in verse 33. Well, let me go to 32 real quick. But he says, there's an important part here. The sheep of the flock will be scattered, but, again, Tracy pointed out last time, I love the but, could we change something there? But after I am risen again, he makes sure that he comforts them with the truth of, I am going to be gone, but I am coming back, right? After I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. So he doesn't leave them wanting or anxious or nervous of something. He tells them this is what will happen, and then this will happen after the fact. I am going to be taken away, but again, I am coming back. Peter answered him in verse 33 and said, though all men, speaking in absolutes here, that all men shall be made to stumble because of thee, yet will I never stumble. Will I never be offended? I will never stumble, right? And in the words, it sounds great. It sounds incredible. It's Peter, yeah, good job, Peter. We really know you're stepping up to the plate. You really are, that strong individual there. And then Jesus Christ gives him truth, and which is a little bit humbling when he says this. Jesus says unto him, verily I say unto thee, that this night before the cock crow thou shalt deny me thrice. Now, this is the second time that Jesus Christ has said this to Peter. Tracy shared it before when they were having the Last Supper together. That is the first time Jesus Christ has said to Peter that he is going to deny him, this night before the cock crows. So this is the second time that he has given this warning to Peter for him to know what is going to happen, as they're going forward, this prediction of his denials. All right, if we turn over into Mark, we'll go to Mark chapter 14. And Alexander, if you would like to read in Mark chapter 14, verse 30, we'll see a little bit about this interaction with Peter from the Gospel of Mark. So Mark 14, verse 30.
And Jesus saith unto him, Verily, I say unto thee, that this day, even in this night, before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice.
So twice and thrice means two or three. Now this, in the record here in Mark, is actually a different prediction than what we see in the record there in Matthew. We have some more information that's included in there because it says in this case that even this night before the cock crows twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. So this is the third time now that Jesus Christ has spoken to Peter about this. And we know that in the Bible, when we see three things, there's an established part there. We'll see it come up again when Jesus Christ prays to his Father about what's about to happen. And so we see another example there where Christ is kind of informing Peter of what's going to happen that night. Even though he, so sternly stands up and says that he will not do this to Jesus. All right, let's look there in verse 31. Tracy, Mark 14:31.
But he spake the more vehemently, If I should die with thee, I will not deny thee in any wise. Likewise also said they all.
So Peter's doubling down. Jesus Christ has now told him again for the third time now what's going to happen. And he's like, no. He even more vehemently, like he more passionately, confesses to Jesus Christ, that even if I were to die, even if I were to lose my life, I will not deny you in any way, right? Anyways, I will not deny you in any way. And then it says, likewise said they all. So Peter is kind of like, leading the charge, and everybody else is like, yeah, neither, we won't do it either. So all the disciples now kind of joining in with Peter and saying, we won't do that. We won't be, offended. We won't be made to stumble. We won't deny you. We will stay with you. Even if we have to sacrifice our own lives, we will stay with you. We'll see how that plays out. All right, so we're going to pick now up as we've gotten to arriving at the Garden of Gethsemane. And I'll just read these 4 verses, which is just kind of showing us how the Gospels lead us into this. The first one is in Matthew in chapter 26 and verse 36. And it says, Then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto the disciples, Sit ye here, while I go and pray yonder. And in Mark 14:32, it says, And they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he saith to his disciples, Sit ye here, while I shall pray. In Luke 22:40, it says, And when he was at the place, he said unto them, Pray that ye enter not into temptation. So Luke actually gives us a little more by the scripture build-up, that as they got to Gethsemane, not only did he ask them to stay here while he went off to pray, he also asked them to pray, requested that they should pray for their own strength to not fall into temptation. And then in John chapter 18, verse 1, it says, When Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over or beyond the brook of Kidron, where was a garden, into the which he entered and his disciples. Now, John's an important part here because we get a little bit of the proximity of the understanding where Gethsemane would be. I do want to read a note from Jesus Christ, our Passover, about the Garden of Gethsemane. And because it also connects to what Tracy was talking about previously, about understanding that the Last Supper and the Passover meal are 2 different things. There's a lot of times we get an error in the teaching that the Passover meal, again, and the Last Supper are the same. And so people, because of that, they will place things like the Last Supper being in Jerusalem rather than potentially being in Bethany. And while we have some of the errors there in thinking that this Last Supper and the Passover are the same thing. So just a quick thing here. It says, John 18:1 has caused many to assume that Jesus' Last Supper was eaten in Jerusalem because the brook of Kidron runs between Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives, where the traditional site of the garden is placed. But there are several things which the biblical student must realize in handling this statement about the disciples moving from the place of the Last Supper to the garden beyond the brook of Kidron. First, there is no reason why Jesus could not have eaten his Last Supper at Bethany, then walked around the Mount of Olives to the southern and eastern sides of Jerusalem for a final look with his apostles before the arrest. Being below the city, they would then start up that beautiful valley and finally walk across the Kidron to the garden. They could even have entered the city via any of its southern or eastern gates, walked past the temple area together one last time, and then left by the east gate to cross the Kidron. God's word does not record all of the events occurring as they walked from the place of the Last Supper to the garden. However, it does record much teaching, prayer, and conversation during this time. Certainly there was time for many actions that simply were not recorded. In the second place, the present-day site of Gethsemane is only a traditional site. Eminent scholars have challenged its authenticity. In Bible times, such gardens were scattered on the Mount of Olives and its surrounding area. Since the actual site of Gethsemane is not known, its exact position in relationship to the brook of Kidron and Jerusalem in Jesus' time is not known. Further, the statement in John that they went beyond the brook Kidron to the garden does not necessitate that they crossed over the brook from the west side to the east. All this information casts doubt on the argument, endeavoring to prove that John 18:1, that the Last Supper was in Jerusalem in the upper room. It is the error in teaching that the Last Supper and the Passover meal are the same, which causes the confusion, because the Passover would have had to be eaten in Jerusalem. But since the Last Supper was clearly not the Passover meal, however, there is no reason for assuming that the Last Supper was eaten in Jerusalem. And potentially it's more logical that it was eaten in Bethany, where Jesus had gone on prior evenings to fellowship and eat with his friends and his disciples. And then upon entering the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus Christ and his disciples were about to spend their last minutes together, and this was a time of intense prayer in the face of immense pressure. And again, it says there's no, solid evidence that it would be Bethany or Jerusalem, but to say it was in Jerusalem, or to say that it was the Passover in the upper room, would be an error in kind of interpreting what the Scripture is saying there, when in reality we don't have anything that's written in there to tell us that they were in Jerusalem at the time of that taking place. Hey, Allie. Or Allison is here. Sorry, Allison's here. I said Allie. Okay, so let's pick back up. Okay, go back to Matthew chapter 26, and we're going to see what's going on as they've reached the Garden of Gethsemane. So we know that Jesus Christ has gone off to pray once again. We also know that in Luke, he has told his disciples to wait and to pray, to be in prayer themselves, so they may not fall to temptation. He's already told them, that they were to stumble this night because of him. So he's now given them, the advice to pray in this moment while they are there, to help them to avoid temptation while he goes off to pray as well. So we'll be there in Matthew 26, verses 36 through 44, Lily, if you'll read those.
Then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto the disciples, Sit ye here, while I go and pray yonder. And he took with him Peter, and the two sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Then saith he unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch with me. And he went a little farther, and fell on his face, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And he cometh unto the disciples, and findeth them asleep, and saith unto Peter, What? Could ye not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again the second time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them, and went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words.
Thank you. And so we open it there as they've come to the garden. He again has given them this request to stay and to pray. While he goes off to pray, he takes Peter and the sons of Zebedee, James and John, with him, and he says. He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, James and John, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. That's Jesus Christ is heading into this, with a lot on his mind as he is preparing for this, right? He is having emotional feelings about what is about to take place. He understands the depth of what it is. He understands the severity of what's about to happen, greater than any of them do, right? And so he's approaching this last time of prayer, right, in this moment here with the disciples as he goes to talk to his Father about what's about to take place, and he is feeling the heaviness of the emotion of what's going on here. And so he knows what disciples potentially may be feeling too, and he's given them the best thing to do in that moment. Pray, right? You pray as well, in these things, that you may be prepared in what's about to happen. And then he says, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry here and watch with me. To watch with me means to be vigilant. I need you to be vigilant. He's asking him to be vigilant with him as he is praying, because he is feeling sorrowful even unto death. And he needs to go to his Father, right, to talk to his Father for his own reassurance and comfort as well. So it's a great thing. Not only does he give the advice to his disciples, but he practices what he preaches, right? He tells them to go to their God, to their Father. He goes to his Father and he prays too, because he is feeling the emotions of the heft of what's about to happen. It says, and he went a little further, and he fell on his face and prayed, saying, "O my Father, if it be possible, bless you. Let this cup pass from me, bless you." Now, biblically speaking, when we see the reference of a cup, the word cup is used as a figurative example to indicate that the person will partake of whatever is in it. And we know from reading the record, or if you have studied it before, that what's in this cup is a pretty significant thing. The cup that is being passed to Jesus Christ, that he's about to be a partaker of, is the most significant thing in the history of mankind. Now that's a pretty big cup, right? Here we see that the cup represents the agonizing responsibility. We know it's agonizing because he is full of sorrow unto death as he's going in to pray to God about this. Is an agonizing understanding, right, of what he's about to go through, right? What he's about to face, as a man facing this thing, he has the emotions of it. And the cup represents the agonizing responsibility set before Jesus of taking on the judgment for man's sin. All of man's sin upon him. And so he goes to pray, and then he comes back. He finds the disciples diligently and diligently standing guard and being there for him and taking care of things, because remember, they just all in unanimous voice cried out that they would be there even unto death. No, he finds them sleeping, lying there, right? But it says there, and he went a little further, he fell on his face. Oh, I read that one. And he cometh unto the disciples and findeth them asleep, and saith unto Peter, "What, could ye not watch with me 1 hour?" Didn't you just say, all these great things, Peter? And this is me putting words in Jesus' mouth. So Jesus didn't say that. He just said, "Couldn't you watch?" I'm saying, didn't you just stand up and just rally the troops that we're going to do this? And then as I went away for even a moment, asked you to be vigilant, vigilant. I keep saying, I want to say diligent. Vigilant, and you can't even do it for 1 hour, right? And you're already asleep. And he tells them, so watch and pray. He gives them the thing again. Watch and pray that ye enter not to temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. And he goes away for a second time, and he prays again to God. It says, if this cup may not pass away from me except I drink it. If the only way that this is possible, the only way that what your plan is to save mankind, if this is the only possible way, then thy will be done. The first time he prays is, if there is another way, let it be, right? But thy will be done. This time he says, if there is no other way, but I be a partaker of it, I drink from the cup, then thy will be done. You can see he goes back in prayer, and the second time in prayer, right, his prayer is a little bit different. He's the acceptance of the understanding of what needs to be done, and yet he still says, thy will be done. He still will do the will of God. Period. Regardless of any of maybe the emotional feelings that he's going through, any of the nervousness or the sorrowful feeling, or the worry about the what he's about to face, he still says, your will be done. If this is the only way, then this is what will happen. So he goes back. Now, surely when he goes back the second time, his disciples are going to be doing a much better job. But when he goes back, he finds them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. We talked about it a little while ago, the significance of the third time. Jesus Christ goes back to his Father 3 times. And in the third time, in prayer with his Father, the understanding of, what God's plan of salvation of mankind is, and the truth of what has to be, and the establishment of what needs to be done is now fulfilled. In the third prayer, we see the fulfillment of the establishment of God's plan for man's salvation, which is Jesus Christ accepting the role he has to play, which is going to be an agonizing death on the cross. to allow for mankind to have a future, to allow for mankind to have an opportunity to be saved from death. So he goes on in Luke chapter 22. So we're going to go to Luke 22. We'll see it there as well. In verse 43 through 45. So Luke 22, verses 43 through 45. Eli, would you read those verses? Luke 22, verses 43 through 45. Again, when you add in the scripture and you build upon it, you get a more complete sense of what's going on. So Luke's going to give us a little more insight, into what's happening here as we add it and build onto it with what we just read in Matthew. So 43 through 45 in Luke 22.
And there appeared to him an angel from heaven to strengthen him, and he was in fear and prayed earnestly, and his sweat became like drops of blood. He fell down upon the ground. When he rose up from his prayer and came to his disciples, he found them sleeping because of distress.
Very good. You were reading the Lambda, right?
Yes.
I think that's really good, especially in verse 45 in Lambda with the interpretation of the Aramaic interpretation of the word stress, because I think that's an important thing that we see here. So a couple of important things that we get built up in this section. Number one is that we see the reiteration that Jesus Christ is feeling all the emotions going into this, the sorrowful feeling, some of the, trepidation, there's things going on there. And his Father has not forsaken him in this moment either. He sends an angel to Jesus Christ to comfort and support him, right? He says there in verse 40, God sends Jesus an angel to strengthen him. All right? He could not relieve Jesus of the responsibility of what he had to do to fulfill that plan of salvation, but he could tenderly and lovingly support and care for his son. And that's what he does. He sees his son agonizing. We see it repeated again in an agonizing moment, an emotional moment, and he doesn't forsake him in that moment. He sends some angel to strengthen him in that moment. He knows what his son's going to have to go through, and he doesn't leave him alone. He sends an angel to strengthen him. We see in verse 44 a big misconception a lot of times that comes out of this verse in Luke 22:44, where it said that Jesus sweat blood. You have to look at it from your English perspectives. We see here it said that he sweat as blood, like the sweat was as blood. Liken as is part of a figure of speech known as a simile. Is when you take an indirect comparison. So you have to have help to make the comparison. So we use like or as to make the comparison work. And so we see this is a simile, a figurative language usage here, that he was sweating so profusely, so much. There's so much emotion. There's so much life. There's so much intensity into the prayer he is praying, because think about what he's praying about. You can understand how intense these three prayers to God are. And it's like, his sweat was as drops of blood coming down. He's not sweating blood, but he's sweating so profusely it's like blood dripping from him, right? And this is, again, signifying just the sense of intensity and severity of what he's praying about. This is it. This is the moment. This is the final, thing going on here. He is having this final conversation with his Father about all that has been leading up to this point. And even he is like, if there's another way, tell me and we'll do it. We'll take care of it, If this is the only way, I'll do it. And then it is the only way, let's do it. And Jesus Christ is accepting of it and is going to go face it. Jesus, with the greatest denial of self and the greatest act of loving obedience in human history, submits his own will to the will of his Father. And when he comes back, he finds his disciples once more asleep. But there's something in Luke that we add here. He cometh to his disciples and saith unto them, Sleep on now, and take your... I'm sorry, I'm reading in Matthew 45, not Luke 45. I had that one marked and I read it. 22:45. Here it is. And he says, and when he rose up from prayer and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow, as the Lamb's verse says, for stress. He understands at this point. They are so stressed as well. They are so anxious. They are also feeling the severity of what's going on. And he kind of recognizes and understands this point here, this third time coming back, that they're exhausted themselves from the sorrow, from the stress of the situation. But at this point, we're going to see it's time. The time is up. So we'll go back to Matthew 26, where I just started reading from. So we're going to turn back into Matthew 26. And Cassidy, if you'll read verses 45 through 47, please.
Then cometh he to his disciples, and saith unto them, Sleep on now, and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doth betray me. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and elders of the people.
So when he comes at this last time, and he finds him asleep again, he says, it's okay. You can sleep now. It's done. Like, the time is up. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. And in verse 46, he says, Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doth betray me. And we know that is referring to Judas Iscariot, one of his own apostles, who has, done this. And while yet he yet spake, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and elders of the people, because they're trying to capture John Rambo. Right? That's an old 80s reference for those of you who are old enough to know that. They're coming after Rambo, right? And they got to bring a huge multitude of soldiers with swords and staves, like clubs and things like that, to take in this really, bad criminal. You have to wonder a little bit about all of these soldiers that are called to go and do this, and they're marching, and they're like, okay, we're going to get this guy. And then they find Jesus Christ is the one they have to take into custody with all of his weaponry, that he carried around all the time, all those things. It is interesting that it is a armed multitude that comes for Jesus Christ. We see this reiterated in the Gospel of John in chapter 18, Emerson. If you want to read John 18, verses 2 and 3, we get a little more of a breakdown of what this armed multitude is like. So John chapter 18, verses 2 and 3. Mm-hmm.
And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place where Jesus
Meaning often.
Oftentimes resorted thither with his disciples. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh hither with lanterns and torches and weapons.
Very good. And so a couple of things here that John adds in there is that Judas would know where to go, because he said this is oftentimes where Jesus Christ took the disciples, right, for prayer and those times together. So he had the intimate knowledge of it, that he leads them there. And he has received a band. This is a band, meaning it's a Greek word, speira, S-P-E-I-R-A, speira, meaning a cohort or a military term for a group of armed soldiers. So Judas now comes back, to the place where Jesus and his apostles are there, but he comes with this band, this cohort of armed military soldiers. But who has sent them? They are sent from the chief priests and the Pharisees. You can imagine they're like, we got him finally, but not for any true reason. Not when they tried to. It's just because they've made it up now. If we can't get him for something real, we're just going to make it up. And that's what they've done. They've just created and contrived this thing. They've bought one of his own, for legitimacy, if anything, to say, oh, even one of his own here, right? And again, that's me talking. I'm adding things in there. But they've kind of bought one of his own to betray him, and now they got him, and they're going to throw in everything they can. A complete armed, cohort of military soldiers to go bring him in. Public enemy number one. Go and get him, right? From the chief priests and the Pharisees. They come thither with lanterns and torches and weapons to go after Christ. There's a note I want to read about this from Jesus Christ, our Passover. It says, during crowded feast times, and we know the preparation in Jerusalem is for the Passover coming up, and they're preparing for a slew of people. Remember, all Jewish men had to go and to be there for this. So they're in preparation for this massive, amount of people showing up here. So in crowded feast times, the temple was normally guarded by an armed guard, a cohort consisting of 400 to 600 Roman soldiers. A cohort, 400 to 600. They must have been really nervous about Jesus Christ. To have a cohort, 400 to 600 soldiers with weapons. Their basic purpose was to maintain order among the multitudes at the feast. There was also the regular Judean temple guard composed of Levites. In addition, according to Luke 22:52, some chief priests and elders accompanied the group making the arrest. At this feast, the religious leaders were so intent on capturing Jesus that they solicited these Roman soldiers along with their own officers of the temple guard to arrest Jesus. In order to get Roman help, the chief priests and other religious leaders needed only to depict Jesus as a dangerous leader of rebels. That, I love how it's written there, because that so epitomizes, if you look just historically, even if you step away spiritually from it, just historically what Rome did to rebellions. All you had to do was tell Roman leaders, there's a rebellion, they're going to send it and they're going to squash it. Because again, it's all about power. It wasn't just about the Pharisees wanting to keep their power. It was about Rome keeping power too. And if the Pharisees finally figured a way out to get Jesus Christ, we'll call him a rebel. We'll say he's trying to overthrow government, and Rome steps in. And we see it. And not only they step in with massive force to take off this rebel. Right? And that's what he is now portrayed as. This dangerous rebel, right, that they need to take care of. And so they'll send help for that. Imagine hundreds of soldiers carrying torches and weapons out of Jerusalem to the Garden of Gethsemane. And then under the light of the full moon of the Passover season, these hundreds of soldiers and temple guards are confronted by the object of their mission. One solitary man. We're sending hundreds of armed soldiers for this one man who's in the garden praying because he's so dangerous. The way it's written there, the image that it portrays is so incredible to think this is what the enemy is willing to go to, right, to get Jesus Christ. All right, we'll jump over, continue there on verse 4 through 9, Jeannie, in John 18, verses 4 through 9.
Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, Whom seek ye? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said unto them, I am he. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with them. As soon as he had said unto them, I am he, they went backward and fell to the ground. Then asked he them again, Whom seek ye? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am he. If therefore you seek me, let these go their way, that the same might be fulfilled which he spake. Of them which thou gavest me have I lost none.
What amazing thing here, right? They all show up, armed to the hilt, ready to go, and Jesus Christ, because he is in communication with God, knows everything. He walks out to them. He meets them and says, Who are you looking for? Who seek ye? Jesus of Nazareth. Oh, that's me. It's me. And they are so taken aback. By the fact that he willingly walks in front of all these armed guards and admits, he's not, we just saw him. He went that way. Right? The guy looking for, I don't know, tall guy, short guy. No, he says, that's me. It's me. Because he just finished conversation with his Father 3 times, praying to God that this is what has to happen, and he's not going to run from it, and he's not going to turn away from it, and he's not going to give up and try to figure a different way out. There is no loophole. There is no back door. This is, I'm doing what my Father told me to do because this is what has to be done, and he willingly walks in front of armed guards and says, it's me. And they are so taken aback, they fall to the ground. It says, as soon then as he had said unto them, I am he, they went backward and fell to the ground. Hundreds of soldiers so taken aback that they fell to the ground. I'm sure these soldiers hadn't seen that in their lifetime either. They're prepared for a fight. That's what they go for. That's why they're bringing staves and swords and torches. They're ready to fight. And this one solitary man walks out and says, who are you looking for? Oh, Jesus. Oh, that's me. And they're knocked to the ground. It says, then asked he again to them, whom seek ye? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, I have already told you that I am him. It's me. If therefore ye seek me, and then look what loving thing he does. If you seek me, let them go. In the moment he's about to hand himself over to the enemy, to go through what he understands to be this agonizing thing, who is he thinking about? He's thinking about his apostles. He's thinking about his followers. He's thinking about the people that have trusted him. And he says, if you seek me, here I am, let them go. So that it fulfills what was said when it said, of them which thou gavest me. And who gave them to him? God. Thou gavest me, have I lost none. Have I lost none. He protects his people even in the midst of about to give himself away as sacrifice. Pretty incredible. All right. Jesus was the master of this situation. He literally handed himself over to the soldiers, but he took care to protect his disciples from any arrest. All right, let's look now at how this unfolds in the Gospels. I'll read these because it's kind of a quick succession. In Matthew 26, verse 48, it says, now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, that same is he, hold him fast. Remember, in this multitude of people, Judas has been back here in this multitude as they've had this interaction. And they have this pre-planned thing worked out so that just to make sure, because we can't trust this guy, but just to make sure they have the target, there is a pre-planned thing where Judas will go out and he will kiss Jesus Christ. That's ironic, right? That a kiss is used here as an example of betrayal. If we know in the Eastern culture, the kiss was something that was always looked upon as being something that was familial and friendly and of love. And we take this symbol of love in that culture and use it as a symbol of betrayal. And Judas emerges to kiss Christ to signify to the soldiers that, yes, this is the right person you need to take. In Luke 22, verses 47 and 48, it says, and while he yet spake, while Jesus Christ is speaking to the soldiers behind a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near unto Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a kiss? Again, because of the cultural significance of that kiss. Jesus Christ had only ever done what was right by Judas, had only ever done what was good for him, had only ever led him in a way to help benefit his life. And Judas betrays him with a symbol of that familiarity, that family connection, that friendship. He uses a symbol to betray the Son of Man into the hands of the enemy. And in Matthew 26, 49 and 50, it says, and forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? So he even calls Judas in that moment friend, because in this representation of their connection is used in such a negative way. We go on into Luke 22 and 49 and 50, and it says, "And when they which were about him saw what would follow, they said unto him, Lord, shall we smite with the sword?" The disciples, his apostles, they were like, we'll fight. Let us fight. Should we fight them with the sword? Just give us the order and we'll fight. Right? And one of them smote the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Now, it's important to know that it's not, the interpretation of the word in there to cut off is not completely cutting it off. It's not like it lopped off onto the ground. He cuts the ear. He severs the ear there, and it's wounded there. At his right ear. So someone in Luke, we don't know who. It just says one of the followers smite the ear of the servant of the high priest. But in Matthew, we get more information. In Matthew 26, 50 through 54, it says, "And Jesus said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? Then came they and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And behold, one of them which were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck a servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. Then Jesus said unto him, Put up again thy sword unto his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled that thus it must be?" So again, we see someone steps forward in Matthew and again attacks the servant of the high priest, right? Thinking he's doing the right thing, right? We haven't been named yet. We can probably guess who it is, but we haven't been named yet who does this. And Jesus Christ, says no, right? He says, in a way, he says, do you think that I need your protection when at any moment I can call upon my Father and he'll send a legion of angels to protect me? We've seen that reference before. The adversary knew that when he was speaking to Jesus Christ in the wilderness. He says, call upon, your Father to send angels that you may not even, hurt your heel. The adversary knew the power, that God had to protect his son. We already know that God was there for his son. He sent him an angel to comfort him in the garden. And he says, after he tells them no, but yet someone steps forward, to fight. And he says, don't you know that my Father could send a legion of angels to protect me at any, right? 12 legions. I keep saying that. 12 legions. Even more than that. All right. So let's see. In John 18 verse 10, Simon Peter, we kind of maybe know. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant, one of the Levitical temple guards, and cut his right ear. And the servant's name was Malchus. So John gives us a little bit more. It was Peter, good old impetuous Peter, who wants to show and prove himself all the time, steps forward, cuts the ear of Malchus, right? And Jesus has to teach him one more time, about this. That Peter is not doing that, because it's the right thing to do. He's doing it because it's the thing he wants to do. Peter acts in his own way to do this, and Jesus Christ corrects him lovingly there to say, you don't need to do this. My Father's here. It says in Luke 22:51, and Jesus answered and said, Suffer ye thus far, just hold it for a moment, is what that means. And he says, and he touched his ear and he healed him. Jesus Christ is about to be handed over to the enemy to go and face his agonizing death on the cross. And what is one of his last things he does before his men? He heals the people that are about to take him into custody. We can understand Peter's actions. As human beings, we would want to fight for the person that we love as well. We would want to defend and protect the person that we love as well. We would not want to see them handed off into the hands of the enemy, at this time. And we can maybe get what Peter's doing there. But Jesus Christ, in this moment, even in what's about to happen, shows love and care and concern to do what is the will of his Father. And he heals the man who Peter attacks there. As Jesus predicted, let me get to the next thing. Last part here. In 52-53 of Luke 22, it says, Then Jesus said unto the chief priests and captains of the temple and the elders which were come to him, Be ye come out as against a thief with swords and staves? When I was daily with you in the temple, ye stretched forth no hands against me, but this is your hour and the power of darkness. Jesus calls it like it is. I've been around you a lot. We have been in the temples together. You've been there when I've been in the temple. And never once have you stretched out your hand against me. Yet you show up tonight with weapons and staves and all these things. And the reason it is because you are under the control of the power of darkness. It is the adversary's moment. It is the destroyer's moment, right? He's going to get Jesus Christ. He says, it is the power of darkness that is at hand here to take him, into captivity and to go into what's going to happen. It is what the adversary wants. But they don't realize it's also the plan of God that this has to happen. It is God's great plan that is about to be fulfilled, going all the way back to when we started, of why the world needed a Savior, going back to when Adam fell, that this is the plan that God has put in place, and it's about to be going on. If the adversary knew that the actions that were being taken at this time were going to lead to the redemption of mankind, Jesus Christ would have never been taken into captivity that night. He would have never been taken into the hands of the soldiers. He would have never been put on trial. He would have never been put on the cross. He would have never been killed so that he could be resurrected. But the adversary doesn't know that. This is the adversary's moment of triumph. We got him, and we're going to kill him, and it's going to be great. But he doesn't understand the greatness of the plan of God that's about to be fulfilled in what's going on here. It finishes up in Matthew 26, in verse 56, but this was done that with the result that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. And then all the disciples forsook him and fled. So it says there in Matthew that when this is taking place, it is fulfilling. Again, this is where we begin the process of the fulfillment of all the prophecies of the Messiah. All the fulfillment of the prophecies has been laid out. All this time is beginning right here as Jesus Christ is taken to the hands of the enemy, and what will unfold leading to the Passover feast there, and when he dies as the Passover lamb for all of mankind. And what happens, just as he predicted, just as he told them they would do, when he's taken away, the disciples, they forsook him. They all disperse. They go away. We see in Mark 14, verse 54, there's a reference to the fact that Peter does follow the group from afar off. So Peter does kind of still follow and see what's going on with Jesus Christ in that moment. So as he's predicted, the disciples scattered from him, and all the disciples forsook him. And we see in Mark 14:54 that Peter does follow him from afar off. But we are now in the beginning moments here of the final aspects of the fulfillment of God's promise to redeem mankind. Jesus Christ is now in the hands of the enemy. And from this point on to the time of his death as the Passover lamb, we'll kind of cover those things coming up in our future teachings. So God, thanks so much for this day in your word and looking at the scriptures. We again are so grateful and thankful for your diligence from the time that Adam broke fellowship to be purposeful in your intent and your desire to reconnect and to reestablish a relationship with your creation, with mankind, for your willingness to sacrifice your only begotten Son to an agonizing and painful death on the cross, to be in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights fully, and to fulfill that promise to raise him from the dead, that redemption for mankind was made available. We are so appreciative and thankful that your Son, Jesus Christ, even in the moments of those stressful times and agonizing times and sorrowful times, that he turned to you for guidance, that he trusted you for wisdom, and that he knew that your promises do not come back void, that he could trust in your promise that you would raise him from the dead, and that he was willing to become that sacrifice for our lives. We thank you that we have the opportunity in this day, so many years later, to still understand you, your word, and the accomplishments of your Son, Jesus Christ, that we may be partakers of that great promise if we just confess with our mouths Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, and we believe in our hearts that you did, in fact, raise him from the dead, and that is all we have to do to be a partaker of that great promise that you made. So we thank you for these truths in your word, that they are able to build us up, to encourage us, to strengthen us in these times that we face now, and that we may share these great and wonderful things with those who are in darkness today and in need of light in their lives. So we thank you and we praise your name, your son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thanks, Allison. We'll see you. Love you.